Hey, Alex, welcome to the Question Guy podcast. And of course, my name is Dr. Keith McNally with everybody who's listening on LinkedIn and wherever on the internet. Thank you so much for joining me in conversation. And so we initially talked about what it is you do, but for my audience, Alex, what do you do?
Keith, first off, thanks for having me. Secondly, to the question, uh, I work with people most commonly who are in career transition.
Okay.
And I work with the ones who are in career transition who may be thinking or wondering or curious about whether their next opportunity should be self-employment, should be
Hmm.
working for themselves, business ownership. All right. So,
That's a
eh,
unique type of transition because most
yeah,
people
it is.
kind of want to just make sure they have a steady paycheck. So
Or,
you're
yeah,
talking to a unique group of people then. They're kind of ready to make a significant investment.
not necessarily,
Not
because
necessarily?
we don't assume that out of, right out of the chute.
Okay.
They may just be curious.
Okay.
And they may just be wondering if this makes sense to explore. I often say that does it does it make sense to consider whether this is worthy of consideration?
Okay.
Right. It's so we're not going to assume outcomes from the very beginning. And a healthy number or healthy percentage of my clients are transitioning military, those
Okay.
coming out of active duty, or those who've been out in the civilian workforce for a while, but are thinking, maybe there's something more out there or different out there for me. So I often say that not everybody who puts their hand in the air and says, I think I might want to be a business owner, should be a business owner. And that's okay. A lot of times people need help just with the consideration of this. Does it make sense for me to learn about this, to explore this? So we start very early with those very simple questions. It gets into
Okay.
what people's backgrounds have been and
Mhm.
what their motivations are, and potentially what their expectations are for their future.
Okay. So you happen to mention the military and veteran community. What has been your contact with? I mean, are you allowed to go on base, or what's been your contact and communications with that community?
I have been on base in the past. Now, COVID
Oh
rewrote
well,
the rule.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
COVID rewrote the rules on that. But on base in the past have been different transition and career-oriented programs on
Okay.
base, and hiring our heroes is one that
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
a
I've heard about
particular,
that. Yeah.
yeah, particular fan of. Hiring our heroes. Hiring our heroes is interesting because it's essentially a big career fair, and the military is invited, and I'm there as the guy who says, "Come talk to me if you're thinking maybe you don't want a job with one of these companies." I don't have a job to
I'm
offer
the other
anyone.
option.
Right, I am. I am the alternative, and that gets to the core of what I do is help people often explore alternatives to what they've been doing, or alternatives to how they've been thinking in the
Okay.
past about their career track. And people who are in career transition, I usually say cast a wide net. A big fundamental rule of mine is keep an open mind.
Hmm.
An open mind allows you to be surprised, or find something that you hadn't thought about. Don't lock in so much. And so when I'm on base or doing a Hiring Our Heroes program or something, I end up having a lot of interesting conversations with people who will take their hand and kind of go, yes, I've talked to that table and I've been down that row, and it's all interesting. But
And they've got a
Alex,
collection of business cards and
yeah,
paraphernalia and swag.
all of that, and then they come to me and go, I've had some great conversations, Alex, but I don't know. I'm also thinking maybe that's not all for me.
Okay.
Maybe that's for other people, and maybe I should be thinking about doing it for myself in some fashion.
So how does that conversation kind of get started? And then, well, let's go there, and then kind of let's because I'm a Marine, and so I'm a Marine. That was my first real job out of high school. I didn't go to college first, and so, but this was back years and years ago,
Right.
and even if I had met you then, I still wouldn't have known what to do because when I left the Corps, I always say I got this rule. I got a starting day story, which is kind of, I lose my shoe, but that's not for this. But when I separate it, and I separated under medical conditions, I had two things. I had one thing in my right hand and one thing in my left hand. I had my DD-214 in one and my car keys in the other. And, they patted me on the back and they said goodbye. And, so I drove off of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, kind of homeless and helpless. And, nobody's kind of having those conversations with me. But this was a time before, any TAPS program, transition assistance
Right,
programs, or
right.
any skill bridge programs or classes. And so, how do you get that conversation going? Because those in transition, and especially those military transitioning out and into the civilian sector, they've got lots of questions. There's lots of uncertainty.
Absolutely.
There's lots of probably fear and frustration and anxiety. And so you've got to kind of work through some of that. And I know I'm rambling, but because
Okay.
it was just an experience,
Let me say that I said rule number one of mine is keep an open mind.
right?
Rule number two is counterintuitive for most people, which is delay decision making. Okay,
Delay
and of course,
decision making.
yeah, it's counterintuitive because
I'm writing this down.
if you're in career transition and you are thinking, I got to figure this out,
Right.
you're wired to think, I got to come to some conclusions. I'm going to have to make some decisions here. And so at the beginning, when I interact with somebody for the first time, and certainly, let's say, transitioning military, when they say, sometimes they'll say, I've always wondered about whether I should be my own boss, or I've thought about being in business for myself or being a business owner. Let's go to the fundamental questions of when did it start and why do you think like that? There
Okay.
are a lot of times people will simply share that they've always wondered if they're entrepreneurial. Okay, now for a lot of military, I'm not sure the military is the place to cultivate entrepreneurial thinking every day, day after
Not when
day.
we talk team.
Right, right. So, and that's okay.
Right.
But now they're coming out, and now they're opening up to the idea that, maybe I can do it differently now.
Okay.
Maybe I can think a little differently. So, delaying decision making also includes the idea that I don't want people to feel pressured at the outset to make some kind of fundamental decision of either I'm going to accept a job or I'm going to be a business owner. Maybe consider both.
Okay.
Maybe start. It's okay to run concurrently on that. And so many of my clients do. And with my blessing, I
Well, how's
encourage
that?
them.
That's I don't know if that's another conversation because that's a lot of work.
Well, it can be. And
Yeah.
I, by the way, and I encourage everyone in that situation to be prepared for that hard work.
Okay.
Ready yourself for the fact that this is going to be a time investment. The job search should be a significant time and energy investment. If you're thinking about being a business owner, it's a time investment and an energy investment as well. Although in my experience with the clients that I work with and the process I put them through, I usually tell them to think about 4 hours a week on average for what we're going to be working on. So it's not necessarily a
Oh, so it's
huge
like kind of
time
going to
commitment.
class, working with you, so like kind of going to school
I'd,
or
I'd like to
something like that.
I'd like to think it's a little more fun
Okay.
than that geometry class you hated in the 10th grade, right?
Uh,
But there are
But
elements.
you got
I
to
do
invest
assign
in.
homework.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
it's
fair
they
point.
spend time with you. You give them work to do. They got to do a whole lot of self-reflection.
Yep.
And is it kind of like a coaching session or is it like a class session? How
It
does that?
They're predominantly a coaching session.
Okay.
All right. But there are elements of there are educational elements, educational components to what I do.
Okay.
Because here's the thing, Keith. I may work with someone for a really long time, or I may work with someone just for a small amount of time until they get to what I refer to as the point of clarity. That's what we're going for here. I don't want anybody to start talking with me and potentially working with me thinking that I'm going to work with this guy Alex for a while and he's going to wave a magic wand and then I'm magically a business owner or something. That's not the end in mind.
Okay.
The end in mind is to start with self-reflection. And I use some coaching tools, some self-assessment to get people thinking, maybe in ways they haven't before, which is no fault of their own. They just haven't had somebody work with them like this.
Right.
So there is that coaching element of getting them to reflect on the front end. Now, the educational piece is important to me also, that if I have someone who I work with who then decides, you know what, Alex, I've got a job offer coming on Monday, and I'm going to take that job. And thank you so much, but maybe we're done here. That's okay. I want them to walk away saying, I learned something from working with Alex, right? If I can get people to think and reflect
Mhm.
and share some education, then most people say, at minimum, well, okay, yeah, Alex helped me in some ways. I understand some things about myself and perhaps about business ownership that I didn't understand or know before.
So, well, now now I'm kind of confused.
Okay.
I don't want to be confused on my own show.
Right.
Only because so as a coach,
Right.
you're what I'm hearing you say is that you're trying to help people make the best decision for themselves at a particular time in their life. But I have not heard you say that this going being a business owner, I'm tripping over my own words. This is the business I want to get you in. You're not telling them to be a business owner for a particular business. You're coaching them through the idea of building a business from scratch,
Now
or
I'm
um,
coaching them through a process typically of, first off, thinking about and learning about whether business ownership is right for them
right. And that's a
fundamentally.
needed conversation.
Right,
And that'd be
right.
multiple conversations. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
that's
needed.
right. Exactly. Then if we get to a certain point, then I'm in a position to share with them some specific business, typically franchise opportunities for them
Okay.
to discuss with. Now part of our earlier discussions are, because I talk with plenty of people, and I always who say in response to my question, do you have an idea for your own business? Do you
You
have a
asked people that.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because I
Yeah.
end up talking with people who have a nugget of an idea that they've been hanging on to for quite a while. Um, they may have been in the Navy for years, and they're thinking in the back of their mind, when I come out, I have this idea. Well, let's talk about it. Let's get it out there. Let's kick it around. Let's talk about what it might take for that idea to take shape, if the right move is for it to take shape.
Okay.
Because a lot of times people, admittedly, I'm not there to throw darts at it. On the other hand, let's not just assume that every business idea is a great one, and that hey, when I get out of the Navy, I got this idea and man, I'm going to go for it. And no one's ever challenged you on it, or you've never challenged yourself on it. What's it going to take? How's it going to work?
Mm,
How are you going to bring it to market? I mean, it could be any number of questions, right?
right.
So that's all good. And some people do have those ideas. And can I help them, kind of develop them, hash them out, bring them to life in some ways? Yeah, I probably can. If I can't, then I'm always thinking in terms of, who can I get this person in front of who can be even more helpful to them if they've got, as I say, that nugget of an idea.
Hmm.
Now, the
Does that mean
franchise,
connecting
yeah,
them with like small business associations or?
could be small business development councils, or SCORE. I don't know if you're familiar with SCORE, an organization that I'm a particular fan of, Service Corps of Retired Executives, that offers no cost counseling to people who have ideas for small businesses or are new small business owners.
Okay.
And it can be very valuable, right? So, uh, yeah, Veterans Business Outreach Centers are another one, VBOX in certain areas. So any number of opportunities to get some help, right?
Okay.
That's how I want people to think that they can have, at least, if not from me, then let's get you the help you need from somebody else, right? Now, so there are those people who have that idea for their own business, and then there are those people who say, Alex, I think I want to own a business, or I might want to own a business, but I don't have an idea. Well, there are
That's for,
there are possibilities there,
yeah.
right? And franchising is particularly popular with veterans, I think statistically, it's about 8% of American small businesses are veteran owned. In the franchise sector, that percentage jumps up to like 14%. 14% of franchises. And so the obvious question is, how is that, or why is franchising so popular with veterans?
Are you going to
This,
answer that question?
I surely will, if
Okay,
you
go
if you'd
ahead.
like me to. Franchise businesses are typically a systematized approach to business expansion, right? So somebody came up with a business model,
Okay.
found out it worked, and rather than raise a bunch of capital and go own everything across America in new markets themselves, they simply say, you know what, we can franchise this. We can bring in new business owners in every new market, and we can teach them, train them, support them, and replicate our business and grow it that way with owners in new markets. So a lot of veterans here, okay, so I'm going to get training, I'm going to have support, I'm going to work from a kind of a systematized approach to a business. And I've
Right.
literally had them say, Alex, what do you think I've been doing in the Army the last 20 years? Right?
You've been
Yeah.
following orders.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They trained me. They give me the playbook, or they tell me what to do. It's kind of like franchising, right?
Okay.
And veterans have typically the self-discipline and the drive and the desire. So they're very popular with any number of franchise companies. The
Any
franchise
any
boards love veterans.
any
Yeah.
franchises in particular that are
Oh, too
popular
many
with vets?
we don't have enough time.
Okay, never.
I mean,
Well,
yeah,
one or
yeah.
two.
Oh, no, I'm serious. We're talking hundreds, or there are thousands of franchises in America, and
Uh-huh.
most of them will say, "Oh, I'd love to talk to veterans."
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. I mean, yeah.
well, reverse the question. What do the veterans say that they're a particular franchise that they're interested in? Excuse me.
Well, so veterans. So now you're raising a great question, by the way, which is
I like that.
that it's the nature of your podcast,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. The idea of a vet-friendly franchise system. Okay, so fundamentally, first off, those exist, and there are any number of them. So what I often have with veteran clients is them saying, well, you're there's a peer group of potentially of my fellow franchise owners who are also veterans. We kind of have some commonalities there. We understand each other in some ways. And back to my point about how franchisors tend to like veterans,
Right.
they value their service to our country. They recognize that they bring certain things, certain qualities to the table as business owners that people who haven't served don't bring. And they do things like they frequently offer discounted franchise fees or expanded territories or things like that. And in so doing, a lot of times they build a nucleus of a subgroup of you, if you will, of veteran franchise owners within their franchise system. And those people, they have a bond and a connection there. And it's a peer group and a support network, if you look at it that way. And a lot of them, they may have regular Zoom calls, or the ability forums by which they can help each other and things like that. So veterans in franchising, uh, it's long been a thing, if you will, and it continues to grow. And I think it will continue to grow because it speaks to what veterans bring to the table when they are thinking they want to be a business owner. They jump in, right? Come on, let's face it. The qualities they bring tend to lend themselves to quality and success as business owners. They're just they're wired from their military experience.
So you're speaking good about people in general, veterans particularly, veterans, me, but I want to flip the coin on that
Sure.
conversation. Surely there are specific issues, maybe obstacles in the way of that, of the veteran, of the military service member, spouse, when thinking about, or even really wanting to be a franchise owner.
Yep.
What are some of those issues? What are some of obstacles? What are some of the stumbling blocks that you've encountered with veterans?
Absolutely. And I have, yeah. Couple things come to mind immediately. One is access to capital. Okay.
Hmm.
And this is true of anyone thinking of owning any business, right? You can't, there are no free lunches. You're not going to
Damn.
be able to do it for nothing. Okay. And so access to capital, and whether you have an idea for your own independent startup business
Mhm.
or whether you want to explore franchising or both, you need to have access to capital. The undercapitalization is the biggest or one of the biggest impediments to business success.
But what is bootstrapping?
Typically,
Is
yeah.
what is bootstrapping then? I hear
Bootstrapping
that
when you,
term a lot.
yeah, bootstrapping is, hey, I've got this idea. I'm going to start a business, probably out of my house. I'm gonna fund it myself from what I've got,
Right.
and I'm just going to build it that way. I'm going to self fund it and get it moving on my own.
Because I hear
Okay,
that
and
term a lot.
bootstrapping, yeah, no, and it works for any number of people. Where it can go wrong is when people underestimate how much capital they're going to need
No.
over some period of time. Bootstrapping, I mean, we have what, gosh knows how many thousands or millions of American businesses in history that have been successfully bootstrapped.
Okay.
But I sometimes talk with people who say, yeah, I'm just going to bootstrap this. And when I ask them to expound on that a little bit or dig a little deeper, they're thinking that they can create Mount Rushmore with a tiny little mound of dirt, right? Or, pecking away at some gravel. It doesn't work that way. Regardless of what the business idea is, you have to have a healthy and reasonable understanding of what your capital needs are going to be.
Okay.
Now, for vets and who may be bootstrapping a business, again, you got to think about how long is this going to take to ramp up? No business is ever at its most profitable in year one, right? Right out of the gate. You're building something. For franchising requires some capital up front, and costs vary widely. It does require some capital up front, and then you're going to need some working capital to continue to grow the business over time. There
So
are
there is a
funding
significant
mechanisms.
investment from the individual to franchise.
Yeah, you have to have some skin in the game. There's
Okay.
no way around that.
Okay.
None. And so for veterans, when I dig down on some of the financial questions, um, the idea of have they put away some money? Have they been saving as they go? Right. And I'm sure you can think back on your Marine Corps experience with guys who were saving money and guys who were spending it all as quick as they got it, right?
Right.
I would encourage any active duty person hearing this to think in terms of just sound, fundamental financial acumen. Think in terms of putting some money away, even if you're not thinking about owning a business. Just put some away, right?
Right.
So, because then if you want to start a business, you're gonna want to have some in reserve, and you may want to borrow the rest or some amount that's needed, and that could be in the form of a loan that's backed by the Small Business Administration, which is the most common form of business funding for small business in this country. There's some other mechanisms, and for a lot of veterans who start businesses of any kind, they've got some savings. They may have their military retirement they can draw upon. So some veterans have a little bit of a cushion there, right? If they're going to be continuing to draw a monthly income over time,
Mhm.
that's helpful, of course, right? So everybody's a little different, and different in terms of what they have in the bank, what they're bringing to the table in terms of the ability to fund their business from their side, and then how they present as a loan candidate, right, for some kind of business funding. And you want to put your best foot forward there. So if you need that kind of capital, you can get it.
So
And
other than capital, though, we've talked significantly for about you're going to need money. It's just, there's no way around that. What are some other obstacles that veterans face that you've seen
Yeah.
in order to get into the franchise game?
They, I will say that they quite often, if they have had, either, now you did it right out of high school, right?
Go
So,
into service? Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
okay. And so you may not have come out of the Marine Corps with work experience or significant work experience, except as a Marine. And so
Right.
sometimes there are veterans who need some guidance on how that essentially that civilian business world works. Okay, that that if you're only used to a military command and control structure and the military life over a period of years, the civilian business world can be daunting, right? It can be intimidating.
Hmm.
I don't ever, when I'm working with a vet, I don't ever want them to feel so intimidated that they feel like, geez, I can't do this. No, everybody starts somewhere in terms of work experience. And by the way, that's another maybe edge that franchising has, is because they train you so well. They train you in their business, right? But
Because
that
they
that
have an
lack of
investment.
experience,
So
right?
the franchise owner or whoever's
Yeah,
selling those franchises,
yeah.
it's their investment to make sure that their brand, their name, and they get a kickback, or they get monies back
It's a
from.
royalty
Yeah.
structure
Okay.
typically. No, you're right though, that it's a partnership. This
Okay.
is a this is a business partnership, and it needs to work for both parties, right? Obviously, the franchisor who created the business, proved the business,
Is that what they're
is now
called, the
a
franchisor? Okay,
franchisor.
'cause these are new.
Right.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
no,
new.
no, a
All new
franchisor.
vocabulary for me.
Think of franchisor as the corporate folks,
Okay.
in control of the business. Think of the franchisee as the individual business owner, a veteran who has now retired from the Army and moved home to Chattanooga,
Got it.
is thinking about becoming a franchise business owner or franchisee, right?
Right.
So they they need to have that bond that they can work as business partners, because the franchisee is investing to buy into the business and now to become that business in, to use my example,
Mhm.
Chattanooga, Tennessee, let's say.
All good.
Yeah. And that's that person's probably exclusive area, exclusive territory. They're not going to bring in another franchisee into Chattanooga, right? And they've invested, and now they're partners with that franchisor who is going to provide them with the training, the playbook, the system, the support, all that, to
Okay.
so that they can execute the business in that part of the world. All right. And in return, because no, you can't ask a business owner to just, here's my business model, take and run with it for free. Okay. They're going to pay, the franchisee will pay a royalty, typically on a monthly basis, some percentage of revenues. And sometimes, by the way, it's a fair question. People say, gosh, I don't know how I feel about a royalty. I'm paying money back to the franchisor. On the one hand, I get that. On the other hand, the real question is, what kind of value are you getting in return for that royalty payment, right? So a veteran who's becoming or exploring becoming a franchisee, uh, I I can find I've had conversations where a franchisee will say, Alex, I'm 5% royalty. How do you like your experience? Oh, it's great. My franchisor, the royalty's only 5%. The support is good. I wish they would fix this, or I wish they would provide a little bit more of that, right? Then I talk to somebody who's paying a 10% royalty with another company, and you might think, gosh, 10%, that's a lot more than 5%. And they're like, oh my gosh, they're great. They support me every which way I can. They're incredibly happy. They don't mind the 10%. So sometimes people say, well, I don't want the higher royalty. I want the lower royalty. And the real question is, wait a minute, you want value regardless of what that royalty is. So you can't just say a 5% royalty business is better than a 10% royalty business, because that's not necessarily universally true.
Do you have those types of conversations on the front end to kind of prepare
Well, that's typically
people?
after I've introduced them to franchises.
Okay.
So after we do front end self-assessment work and use some coaching tools, get them educated about business ownership of all types. If they want to press forward and be introduced to some franchises and learn about some specific business models, some specific companies, then I take everything I've learned about my client and do a little homework and come back to them with usually 3 franchise models. And those, again, I select those typically based on the conversations I've had with the client.
Sure.
And we present those options to my client, and then I introduce them to those companies. And at that point, now they're into the each franchise's candidate system, where they're now going to have some individual meetings on the phone or Zoom with corporate people at first to learn specifically and deeply about how those businesses work. So once you get into that phase, that's where you start, is talking with corporate folks to just learn the business. One phone call may be about operations, and one phone call may be about financials, or any number of things. You're going to learn the nuts and bolts of specific business models through those initial early stage calls with the corporate people. Right? That's where that part of it starts. Yeah.
Well, Alex, then it sounds like you stay busy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, I keep coaching them all through that process too. And people use me at that point in different ways. They want to share with me what they've learned from exploring franchises and learning those specifics from those companies. And I always remind people it's okay for them to let their brain ping pong around a little bit. If you're talking to 3 companies, you may get off the phone with one of them and say, wow, I really like that. And the next phone call, I like that, but not as much as the first one. And then you talk to them all the next week, and your opinions shift because you're learning different things. But you're doing this based on knowledge acquisition. You're not going with your gut so much. You're not just thinking, oh, that one sounds better than the other one. No, you want to dive into those conversations to have real substantive conversations about specifically what they do and how they do it. So remember at the beginning when I said delayed decision making?
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Yeah, at that point, you're still delaying decision making. You want to soak up all that information, all that knowledge. And then at some point, typically after, maybe
There's
it's
the
after,
second thing you said that has
yeah.
point of clarity.
Yeah, well, that's what we're still going towards.
Yeah,
right.
Those are 2 things I wrote down.
Yeah, exactly. And well, number 1 was actually keep an open mind. So you better write that one down too. Yeah. So you are learning specifics, but you want to delay decision making. Who's going to make up their mind about owning a business based on one phone call with a corporate guy? Hopefully no one does that, right? So it's human nature to start forming opinions, but a lot of times I'm trying to slow people down a little bit. Hold on, let's learn more. Let's learn more. Have another phone call, have another webinar, talk to, that kind of thing. And that's where it's counterintuitive, because the process is designed ultimately to help you make good, informed choices, right? But it doesn't mean you have to rush to do that. So yeah, it's
So with all of this, how much do you charge per client? Like
0.
when you what?
0. Yeah, no, that's surprising people.
Yeah,
that's my
now,
coaching.
Now that's
now it sounds too good to be true.
Yeah,
like,
now
what is this guy peddling? Right?
What are
No.
you peddling? What's
So
going on?
So
how does this work?
So this, by the way, and when I say that, I don't charge any. I'm also not a volunteer. I'm a businessman. I have a business. I have a company here, and
okay,
and I make a profit, right?
Okay.
But the business model is, and you may have people on this podcast wondering, okay, yeah, now I'm really interested. What is the business model? And the short answer
your
is
business model.
Our business model is similar to a search firm. Okay. And people may have worked with a search firm before, or sometimes commonly called a headhunter, if they've talked to one of those people who may be working with job candidates to fill positions for companies, right? Our business model is similar to a search firm. I work with a lot of people. They pay no client fees. I coach them through a process. I get paid when one of my clients places with a franchise and becomes a franchise business owner. Right? I'm compensated
That franchise
but that
owner?
franchise pays me. My clients never pay me a dime.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's always free to talk to me.
Okay.
And my coaching services are always free. And another point is I don't add any expense to somebody starting a franchise. Sometimes people wonder, well, wait a minute, are you some kind of middleman that's adding to my expense? And the answer is no,
Okay.
because franchises in the US are actually federally regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. And if you call a franchise on the phone out of the blue and say you want to learn about that and become a franchise, you'll pay the same franchise fee if you call them direct as you would pay if you worked with me. The difference is I'm going to prepare you better for the process and get you ready. And when I introduce people to franchises, that my clients jump to the head of the line. You don't have to wait long for a call back. Otherwise, you're just some guy calling in off the street.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's real
So, but
interesting.
yeah, but that's our compensation comes from the franchise community, not from our clients. And that's why the focus is on coaching, right? I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're going to make your own decisions, but I'm going to walk you through a process that better empowers you to make those decisions and to make those choices. And back to that word again, gets you that point of clarity where you feel like, okay, now I know what my next best move might be, which by the way, may not be business ownership, maybe accepting a job offer, maybe, taking some time off or to relocate or any number of things, right? Clarity comes in different forms to people.
Well, I'm going to add a word. I'm going to add empowerment there because after you got clarity, you are empowered to do what you need to do. So I added it to my notes.
That I will tell you, people find this very empowering often versus a job search. All right. And again, I'll remind people, a lot of people I'm working with are working with me concurrent with a job search. That's fine. Cast a wide net, be open to all kinds of possibilities. The answer may be in the form of a job. It could be in the form of business ownership. But empowerment, business ownership is about empowerment and control. And this is a big one for a lot of veterans who maybe have felt like, gosh, in this next stage of my life, I want a little more control. Okay. So they find it empowering to think in these terms of business ownership. If you're in job search mode, you can apply for jobs. You can do that, hit that submit button online. It doesn't feel empowering. You don't really have a lot of control. You're hoping they
call you back.
they call you back, and you're crossing your fingers in the meantime.
Alex, this has been an incredible conversation. And I've learned a lot just from the 30 minutes that I've spent with you. How can people find you other
They
than
can.
LinkedIn? I found you, we found each other on LinkedIn,
We
but
did.
is that your only place of contact or?
Well, first off, I have um, a website, and it's A Inman. My last name is spelled Inman, so it's ainman.esourcecoach.com. So again, ainman.esourcecoach.com
I'll put
is
it
a
in the
website.
description. Okay.
Yeah, and I've got all kinds of stuff in there, information and background and testimonials and all that good stuff. And then, or send me an email. Can I give out my email address here for your
Yeah, go ahead, because I'm
podcast?
going to put that in the description too.
Yeah, it's ainman@esourcecoach.com. So not far off from the web address, right?
Perfect.
And I am on LinkedIn. That's right. And so you can find me there.
And it doesn't matter where they first contact you, just as long as they make contact.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, just reach out. And again, I'm happy to talk with anybody who is thinking through their transition to civilian life, or people who are civilians. I work with both, but our focus here was vets.
Right.
If they're wondering, it's where a lot of, I always say, if people had it all figured out, they wouldn't need us, right? So if you have questions, if you're wondering, how would this work, or should I think about it? That's where we start with everybody.
Cool. Alex, thank you so much for making this episode of the Question Guy podcast so special. Have a great day.
Keith, thank you so much for having me. My best to you and all the podcast community out there. Thanks.
Cool.